Land acknowledgement, Anderson Ranch would like to acknowledge that our campus resides on the traditional ancestral territory of the Ute people who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Through our mission to promote a wide range of arts, cultures, and voices, we commit to partner with and honor the indigenous ancestors and residents of this sacred land where we learn, work, and create. It is my pleasure to introduce Anna Tsouhlarakis. Anna received her MFA from Yale University. She has participated in various art residencies, including Skowhegan, Yadao, and was the Andrew W. Mellon Artist in Residence at Colorado College. Anna's work has been part of national and international exhibitions at venues such as the Neon Foundation in Athens, Greece, White Frame in Basel, Switzerland, Rush Arts in New York, the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, the Nasher Museum of Art at Duke University, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, Utah Museum of Fine Arts, the Heard Museum, the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian. She has upcoming exhibitions at Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the University of Denver, and the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. Her work appears in several anthologies of Native American art, including the recently published Art for the New Understanding, Native Voices from 1950 to Now. In the fall of 2022, Anna will be part of the National Portrait Gallery's Portraiture Now Kinship exhibition and will also have performances throughout the year in the NPG as part of the Identify Performance Art as Portraiture series. Anna is Greek, Creek, and an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation and lives and works in Colorado. Please join me in welcoming Anna.
Hello. Emil was one of the first people to ever pronounce my name correctly, so that was good. All right. Are we ready? Maybe? All right. So, kind of swinging around up here. I'm a trained sculptor. I think at a very young age, I always knew that that I worked three-dimensionally very easily. I think I told some people today, I never quite thought of myself as an artist because I wasn't a good drawer. And like when you're in elementary school and junior high, usually you think of the artists or like the people that could draw like Garfield really well or something. And I was not that kid. And so it really was when I got to college and I was able to see that, I could use found materials, that I could work in a way that wasn't just two-dimensional, that I really found my voice. This piece is one of my first kind of big pieces that I think really began my professional practice. This is from 1999. It's called Travois. And it was part of my senior thesis show at Dartmouth College, where I was a double major in Native American Studies and Studio Art. And I say that because that's always been really important, both my background and culture and how that's informed my work, but also the learned knowledge of academic kind of understanding of the history of Native Americans and colonization. And how, at the very beginning of making, I was always interested in bringing issues and that part of my identity into my work. So when I was at Dartmouth, I would look through different anthologies of art and photography of Native peoples. And something that always caught my eye were the photos of Edward Curtis from the mid-1800s. And one photo in particular was of, I believe it was a Grovant family, who had a horse and they had a travois behind them, which was their form of transportation and kind of movement so they could take their encampment to different places. And being a native that was born in Kansas, and then we went back and forth between New Mexico, then I went to college out in New Hampshire, I was always aware of my connection to land or my lack of connection to land. And so when I would see the Edward Curtis photos, and and that image in particular of the tribe and the family, I realized that I had become, even though my tribe isn't culturally nomadic, that I'd become a nomadic native. And that, it was always important to me to keep like everything close to myself so I could go quickly if I needed to, even though like I was in college and it wasn't like I was gonna have to pack up at any moment. But I always felt like that because I was in this place that I really loved, but I didn't belong there, like culturally. And so, so I decided to make this travois that fit me, and it had backpack straps that fit exactly to my frame and everything. And when I put this in the gallery for my thesis show, I'd only done real, sculpture up until this point. Somebody said, "Well, when are you going to use this?" And I didn't quite know what they meant. I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, aren't you going to take it around and start using it?" And it never dawned on me to activate it. And so this was really kind of a transformational time of creating works and realizing that they could be activated in space and in different places. And it was really nerve-wracking because I'd never done performance before, anything like it. And I was nervous, being a brown girl in, rural New Hampshire, I really thought like I might get arrested and they'd pull me over and give me a ticket. So that's my license plate for my car on there. And I learned how to do bicycle signals, like so I could turn in the street. Because I was like dying inside. I was so nervous. But it definitely pushed me forward into working in different ways. And this idea of pieces coming together in terms of sculpture and performance happened a lot during graduate school. So this is a piece that's called Rocket Ship. And so when I present this piece or anytime I talk about it, it is a fully working rocket ship. It's about 12 feet tall. It has a long chain on top of it that you can kind of see. You can see my documentation skills weren't that great back then. And it's just made of different found objects. So when I present this piece, I'll usually read the text and then I'll show the usage of the rocket ship. So this is the text that goes along with it. When the natural resources of Earth start becoming scarce, many people will look towards the option of leaving this planet in hope of finding another planet that will sustain life. While most people will be in the fancy, sophisticated NASA-type space shuttles, there will be people, such as Indians, who cannot afford such luxury and will have to build their own ships. These less complicated rocket ships will not be able to take off on their own and will have chains that hook on to the larger rocket ships. But one thing each of those shoddy rocket ships will have is an escape hatch in the floor. As all of the larger spaceships begin their countdown to take off, all the Indians will be slipping out of their escape hatches. The Indians will be putting their feet on the ground while everyone else is on their way out of here. And so this is the interior. It had like a Southwest decor kind of happening. And the floor of the rocket ship is turf. And so if you peel up the turf, there's a big escape hatch in it. And so it can hold up to 5 people. It's really stable. I think we had a party or two in it back then. And so this, mind you, this was in 2002 when I initially made this first one. And it was before, the kind of personalized space race that we have going on now, the commodification of space travel, and the ideas of like land back or anything like that. And so last year I was asked to be part of this exhibition that's at the NSU Art Museum in Florida. And it's a exhibition focusing on the artists of color that came through the Yale MFA program from 2000 to 2012. And so, and it's up right now, I think up until January in Fort Lauderdale. And so they asked me to recreate this piece. And so I made another iteration of it, but added a couple more rocket ships to it. So these are all the same. They're fully working rocket ships. The large one is around 12 and a half feet tall, holds 5 people. The white one is about 9.5 feet tall and holds 1 person. And then the small one, the triangular one, is about 6.5 feet and it holds 1 person. And so, something that was on the first one as well, but you can kind of see here is that each of these has numbers on the side of it. And those are, so now I have 3 kids, they're 8, 10, and 12. And I decided that I would make one for each of them. And so their certificate degree of Indian blood number that shows their enrollment in the Navajo Nation is the number that's on the outside of the rocket ships. And so they have, and the interior of them are decorated kind of in their personality. So they're super excited. They have rocket ships. And when I was at Yale, that's also where I discovered kind of like the next kind of movement into new media, where I started doing video. Before that, when I would do performances, it was all documented by photography. And so, and I was pretty hardcore about that. I wanted you to have to be present in order to understand it, and I felt like video was, it let you believe that you understood what happened too much. That was my thinking back then. And so, but then I, opened up and tried this out when I was at Skowhegan after I finished graduate school. And so this is from the summer of 2002, but then was first, finally edited and shown in 2004. And it's called Let's Dance, after the David Bowie song. And so for the span of 30 days, I danced with different people, inverting the idea of the native as educator and guide and playing with that. But also, this is, when we think about context and what things were happening in 2002, there weren't many specifically Native women working in nonlinear, non-narrative video. And when there was Native women in video, it tended to be the stereotype kind of exoticized image of what a Native woman should look like. And so that's something that I've always pushed back on in my work, is the idea of precise, kind of precious technique and skill. And so I've always been really interested in creating work that was much more casual and kind of handmade. And so you can kind of see just me being in shorts and wearing flip-flops and things like that. I'm, making an ass of myself in a lot of this. And that's what I wanted it to be, because I hadn't seen that casualness within Native art before. And my dad's an artist. He makes jewelry, beautiful Native American jewelry. And so we always have some great conversation about, he's like, can't you make it prettier? Can't you make it better? In terms of the build of something. But I love the idea of pushing back on those definitions. And that's one of the biggest things within my work, and why I wanted to become an artist, is that, there seemed to be a tight boundary on what was Native art. And that's why, even today and forever, I will always say first, I'm a Native artist, because I want to push back on somebody, creating that definition for us. And it seems so silly, because I know other artists don't necessarily have to think about that, but that's something that I find Native artists have to deal with all the time. So these were all the Native, the Jewish women that were at the residency, and they taught me the hora and lifted me on the chair and scared me to death. Let's see. And so this is the video. It's 15 minutes long, but we won't watch. It's increments of 30 seconds, me dancing with different people. So I'll just kind of skip around.
On a hill, you better come inside like we did.
Gluin, cuss, 1, 2, 3. Gluin, cuss, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, car cuig sé seach.
Oops.
We're not profiling, we're freestyling. We got you dancing in the island. You be smiling from ear to ear. Let's make this
Oh, there we go. Might recognize somebody in there. see. So in the later 2000s, I was still exploring different performance art and different ideas of indigenous stories and myths. I kind of got into this idea of like, not necessarily seeing myself as like a native futurist, but like what are the myths that are going to come, in 500 years, in, 50 years, those types of things. And so this is from a body of work called Legends that kind of explored these different possible myths of the future. And these are stills from those performances. This piece is called Edges of the Ephemeral. It's from 2012, and it's a large-scale installation that was done at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's since been shown up in Jackson Hole, and in Brooklyn, in Baltimore, and Colorado Springs. And so now it's resting peacefully back on the Navajo Res. But this is the first piece that where I started using text in my work. I'd used it a little bit before, but this was kind of the first kind of big overt piece. So I was living in DC at the time, but I was asked to be part of this statewide exhibition in the state of New Mexico. And the theme of the exhibitions that summer were about time. And so I decided to focus on the Navajo concepts of different worlds, which are related to our kind of ideas of time. And so some people say we're in the fourth world, some people say we're in the fifth world, some people say there's no world after this. You have to remember, like, our reservation's huge. It's like the size of West Virginia. And so, I'm from the New Mexico side, east side. So some people on the east side might have, different stories and kind of cultural kind of beliefs, and they might actually be the opposite of people on the other side of the reservation. So I was really curious kind of how this would pan out. And because I was living in DC, I was really missing my connection to home and to like home communities. And so I decided to create a survey using SurveyMonkey and send out just like, I think it was like 4 or 5 questions about kind of these ideas of time and different worlds, and sent them out to all the Navajos I knew and asked them to forward it on. And so in the end, I got all of these responses. I think I got like 60 or 70 responses from different people, and used the text of their responses in this signage. So as you walk through the spiral, the kind of the tenor of the words changes from negative kind of into neutral into more positive. And so I was really excited about the success of this piece because I loved the idea. I think I've always used my community and my family as a resource. I wouldn't call myself a community artist, but I definitely source the community for material. And that use of social media and of kind of, online surveys was something new. And so I'd done several iterations of this project in different ways, and sometimes involving different tribes and asking, different questions and utilizing that text. But it was really interesting and something that I explore in my work a lot now, because in like within Native communities, we're very spread out in different places, on reservations and in big cities, and we have a low population comparatively to other groups of people. And so online communities and social media has really become a place where we can connect in different ways. And I think it was around 2015 when I read something like the percentage, like Native Americans have the highest percentage of active social media users of any group of color or any group in the United States. And so, and you really saw that kind of come to a head during, in 2016, during the Standing Rock protests in North Dakota, and how people were able to spread the word about different issues. And you see that now, like in a lot of ways, but I think it's really given leverage to our voice in a more powerful way than we've ever had. And so I've liked to use those kind of ideas, like in terms of online sourcing, but also as a medium, which you'll see in a little bit. This is another one view. This is a piece that was at University of Chicago. It's called She Made for Her. It's made out of source material that I sourced when I lived in DC, and it's all IKEA remnants. So I think I have time to tell you this kind of goofy story. But so this project kind of came together when I was at the Smithsonian, the National Museum of the American Indian. I think it was a snow day, and I took my kids to the museum just to walk around. And I mean, we knew a lot of people, not that we know every native in DC, but we knew most of the people that worked at the museum. And so it was like a playground to them. They'd always like run around and stuff. And when we were there, I saw this woman giving a tour, and she wasn't wearing like the usual clothes of one of the tour guides. She was just wearing kind of like a down jacket. And then I started listening to her, and I realized, and she was with a big group of people, like probably a dozen people were following her. And I realized that the information that she was giving them was total BS. Like, she was just making stuff up and like talking about artifacts that were being shown and being like, this is a breastplate. And I was like, that's a chair. Like, just like coming up with crazy stuff. And I was like blown away and really interested in this idea of formed and created narratives, and that like all of these people would be leaving this space after that day, and this would be their indigenous knowledge that they would be carrying. And so I decided to create this exhibition for her. That's why it's called She Made for Her. And so I sourced all, the material from IKEA remnants, from the store, from stuff off Craigslist, from stuff that I dumpster dove for, and wanted to make these seemingly utilitarian objects. And I sent images of these pieces before the exhibition to friends of mine, and about 20 Native women sent me back their descriptions of the use and the history of these objects. And so as you're in this space, walking around, there's hidden speakers. And so you might be sitting on the bench and there's a speaker next to your ear of a woman telling you like the story, the long story of these objects and like what they had been historically used for and how that might be used today in the modern world, like kind of different things like that. And they're in, most of them are in English, but some of them are in native languages like Crow and Navajo. Let's see here. This is, so around 2018, a study came out from a health center in Seattle about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and how there was a staggeringly high number compared to like our overall population of women and girls that were murdered or missing, and how a majority of the cases that had been reported had never been resolved or even followed up on. And so I decided to do this piece. I asked Native women, again, kind of a call on social media, to send me a portrait of themselves, a selfie. Because one thing that I noticed when we started seeing all of these missing posters of women was that their portrait was pulled off of social media. And so it's really, that was how they ended up being commemorated in those missing posters. And so that idea of the selfie became kind of referential to the whole movement for me. And so I have around, and this is kind of an ongoing project, I have around 350 selfies right now. And so I had put them together in a video where they were all shown for different lengths kind of randomly. And during this piece, I have a big piece of paper on the wall and a big chunk of graphite, and I try to draw every woman's portrait very quickly, like just to trace it. And there, at no point do I, ever am I able to finish the drawing. And so it's kind of a mad scramble trying to do it. And in my eyes, it's kind of seen like, I see it as like a reverse kind of exquisite corpse exercise. And so there's the layering of that process, but also with kind of the medium and like the movement of never being able to kind of finish. And so this is called trace. So the the video is usually shown along the end result, which were these drawings. And so there were 8 in total. And so this is all kind of my work in this issue has culminated into a show that's opening tomorrow at the National Portrait Gallery in DC. So every couple of years they do this thing. I don't know this is like way before the pandemic was the last time they did it, but it's called Portraiture Now, which is meant to be a biennial of people, like 8 artists across the US that are doing portraiture or working in portraiture. And so this iteration is called Kinship, and so I'm one of the artists in that. And I have this piece that's going to be on display at the Portrait Gallery starting tomorrow, and that'll be up until January of 2024. But my main piece, like this is kind of like just showing kind of the issues that I'm talking about within the exhibition. But the 2 big pieces will be the performances that I have one in May of 2023 and one in November of 2023. So that's kind of exciting stuff that'll come up. And it's really different because a lot of the times when I've done performances, they've been done in front of maybe 5 people maximum when it comes to like documentation or helping me in different ways. And I've never done a performance in front of more than that. So that's going to be kind of nuts to all of a sudden be in front of hundreds of people. We'll see how that goes. So I'm just switching around to like different bodies of work. This is kind of more recent. This started in 2019. It was done during my time at Colorado College as an artist in residence there. I was there for the full academic year and had a studio right in the museum. And it was really nice because it was the first time in my life where I didn't have the pressures of having to work outside of, making work or anything. And so my focus was just that. And during this time, this is when like the term decolonization started becoming really popular. And so I started really thinking about what that would look like within artwork, within sculpture specifically, or, within my practice. And so I started thinking about what makes me different than you? Like, what makes me Navajo and you not? I mean, natives come in all different colors now. My husband's Chickasaw, and he has blonde hair and blue eyes. But so what is it that makes us indigenous? And so I started thinking about, like, what is it culturally within my tribe that is specific Navajo? And I started thinking about the use of binding and how at a very early age, it's something that's always there. And, as soon as you're born, you're swaddled and put in a cradle board. And, as soon as you have hair long enough to brush, it's bound up. There's this idea that, like when have your hair down and it's kind of going all over the place, that is kind of illustrates how you think in the world. And so if you leave your hair crazy, and you try to go through the day, your day's not going to go as well as it might if you, respect your hair, because that, like, we see this as kind of part of our culture and our history, that if it's bound back, then, you're adding respect and you're going through the day with respect. So it's going to be a better day in the end. And so we're taught those things throughout our life of like, how do you go through life in beauty is what we call it, or, with respect and honor for your people and your culture. And so I started thinking about that binding movement, but also like in the way the way we make medicine bottles and different things. And so a lot of times I use performance as a way to jumpstart an idea or to sketch something out, kind of. And so I had a big roll of sinew in my studio, and I just started wrapping my head with it. And so this was like the first sketch of this whole project. And so it's a video, and also there's like photo documentation of it. And then I started thinking about, okay, if I'm Indigenous and I'm using this action to kind of decolonize something, what would I decolonize? And so in terms of art making, I decided that, you know, like I was thinking a lot about like Sol LeWitt, and because when you tend to go into like a sculpture, like a basic sculpture class or something, you usually make some sort of cube at some point. And so that becomes like the building block of kind of contemporary sculpture. And so thinking about his work and using, again, IKEA remnants as a stand-in for that, that becomes like this Western icon that needs to be decolonized. And so this, so I had 12 of these pieces, like they're IKEA table legs. And so those are meant to be like all of the different kind of corners of a cube, right? There are 12 kind of corners to it. And then, and so throughout this video, it's a 5-minute, or it's like 20-minute, but I cut it down to 5, video of the performance. I'm trying to stack and arrange these pieces around my head with the sinew. And so some other things that came out of this project, which I called Incomplete Drawings of Decolonization, were these small sculptures that were made predominantly from aspen, but some of them are from other wood, sinew, and they had these casts of hands that were painted black, and then porcupine quills. And so these were my sculptures that illustrated decolonization. And so you can see the decolonization working because the porcupine quills are like growing out of the IKEA remnants. And this one has like little antler horns coming out too. And like I said, when I was there at Colorado College, I was right in the museum, and I'd have a lot of conversations with the museum staff about just like their work and what they were doing and what they were trying to do within, their own projects. And we talked a lot about kind of the intention of the museum in the way that they were curating and creating text to go along with that, and the activities that they would provide to go along with that, and how they hoped that viewers would leave with specific, kernels of information, right? Or, ideas that maybe were trying to be illustrated in a specific exhibit. And so I started thinking a lot about that, and this was like, when race relations weren't great in our country. But it was, so I started thinking about how does one cultivate like a specific reaction. And so back, 1,000 years ago, I randomly taught second grade one year, and I learned about pedagogy, like different pedagogies and of like getting kids to learn and behave in specific ways. And one of the kind of easiest ones that kind of came to mind was the idea of positive reinforcement. And how, you can see a kid that's running around in the classroom, and there might be another kid sitting very nicely with their legs crossed, with their hands in their lap, and you say, oh, I really like the way Jimmy's sitting, you're doing a great job. And then maybe like Johnny over here will notice that, and he'll want to go sit because he'll want to get praised. And so I started thinking about this in terms of like art and race and like putting things out into the world to get like specific reaction. And so I came up with these text pieces that ended up being billboards that I put around Colorado Springs. And so they originally came from a very warm and like kind of fun way of thinking about this, but I know they're very sarcastic and kind of snarky too, which I like. And so these were up for about 3 months in Colorado Springs. And so at the same time that they were put up, it was during Native American Heritage Month, which is November of 2019. And I created an account on Instagram and one on Facebook, and had all of these text pieces. So just like the other ones, these all kind of dealt with different stereotypes and ideas. And that, you know, were specific to Native people. And it was a business account, so I learned about analytics and whatnot. And so I started pushing out like 3 or 4 of these per day during that month to different people. And so you can be specific about who you want to kind of discover these. So I could focus on like women that are 50 to 60 years old, handbag shopping in South Carolina. And so this would like just kind of pop up in their social media feed. And so I love this idea, this kind of anonymity of just information being that was kind of forced on people dealing with Native stereotypes. And through the analytics, I was able to see that there were about 35,000 interactions with them. And so that means somebody actually clicked on it or hovered above it for a bit. And so, let's see. Yeah. And so this is what's going to be shown at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, is just this same project in there. And so we're just picking up and moving it there. But there's also another project I'm working on with the Wexner Museum at Ohio State University. And it'll be text pieces similar to this, but dealing with the history and like the area of Central Ohio. And so that'll be in the lobby of the museum and on the exterior of the building. They have this kind of weird grid-like system over it. And so there'll be banners all around it. And there's digital billboards all the way down like the main streets in Columbus. And so these will be on the digital billboards, and there'll be static billboards. So it'll be kind of like this invading kind of text dealing with Indigenous histories of Central Ohio, which is kind of exciting. So that'll open in January, or I think, yeah, something like that. I don't want to talk too long. This is a performance piece that was done at Haverford College in March of 2020, where I was burning documents of relationships between Quakers and Native Americans, just rubbing it out all over their quad. So there you go. This is brand new work that I'm still kind of figuring out, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of put it in here. I had never dealt with ideas of kind of femininity necessarily within my work. And so I've kind of circled back, utilizing text and sculpture, to these ideas of futuristic myths and how, like myths that might occur, you know, in 100 years. And when I talk about femininity, I know it doesn't look very like girly in that feminine way or something, but it was this idea, like I'm trying to like deal with this idea of like the rawness and aggressiveness of motherhood. Like this idea that, you know, I feel like if anybody tried to harm my kid, like I would break a bottle and stab them with it. Like that, you know, like how do you create work that somehow speaks to that intensity? And I think it's so unique and interesting. And so that's kind of what I've been kind of working through right now in my work. And so these are pieces that kind of deal with that. And then this is another one. This one having to do kind of with like climate change. There's 2 videos in the piece. And then, oh, there's blood. Yeah, that's sheep's blood. We butchered some sheep over Labor Day for my video. But we ate the meat. And it's a Navajo tradition too, so it's like not just random. And this is another text piece. So the first one is called her first story, Shadows and Bones, and this one is called her second story, Blood and Water. And in this one, like it's kind of that feeling of, you know, sometimes when you see something that needs to get done and nobody's doing anything about it, and you're like, well, damn it, I guess I'll just cut my belly open and make some water and fix climate change. And this was reminiscent too of, I mean, like kind of alluded to this idea because I had 3 kids, but I had 3 C-sections. So I'm trying to work out and like actually bring kind of those kind of stories into my work that I never have before. Yeah, and that's about it.
question and answer. If anyone wants to raise their hand, I can bring a mic to you or someone across the room as well.
Should I stand? I don't have to stand. Thank you, Anna. When I see your earlier work, for example, the Let's Dance video, and some of the later work with the IKEA sculpture, what comes to my mind is an encounter with the other, and who is positioned as the other, right? Because and thinking about that, of course, in terms of colonialism, and of course, the encounter with Native Americans would have been the encounter with the other, right? And in your work, I see it as a flipping of who is considered the other and the subjectivity, right? So I find that interesting, and I just want to say how powerful the public text work was. There's definitely something about, was that Denver where it was installed?
Colorado Springs.
Oh, Colorado Springs. That was really powerful. Okay, so what I want to ask, I'm just kind of laying the foundation of what I want to ask. So yes, your work is about encountering the other. I'm just thinking about what other encounters through your work. The Instagram page was that one Native artist. I'm thinking about how is your work in conversation with other Native artists, yeah, I think in terms of thinking about the other from a collective standpoint rather than from an individual standpoint. I wonder if there's if you're thinking about that at all.
I mean, I think I always wanted that. Like, after I finished undergrad, like, I thought I was going to move to New York and I was going to find my natives and we were going to write a manifesto and we were going to, like, rock the world, right? Like, that's what I believed. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to find like-minded people. And then, like, the personalities of the art world came in play. And I realized that, Yale hasn't put out that many Native artists. I think there's, like, maybe 4 of us in the past 25 years. And so I found myself in a different space of being alone in a lot of places. And when I came out of graduate school, there wasn't a community I could necessarily cling to. And so that I thought I would eventually find. And then when I saw people doing things, it tended to be men. And they didn't want anything to do with a woman in their group, you know? They were like, and so so while I always yearned for that, I never found it. I think just now, like in recent years, I've begun to feel like there's kind of a stronger interest in collaboration and community in terms of like Native artists in that way. But it was just unfortunate. I think it was just the time and the place of when I came up in the world that I never found it. And I just realized that the circles I ran in were different than where I felt there were other, I don't know. It just was always difficult, but something I've always wanted.
Brilliant talk. I love seeing your work. Okay, 2 questions. First question, you said that you're about to do a performance soon with more people, in front of more people than you have in the past. And I wanted to know what you anticipate as the challenges and the not quite benefits, but like what are the new horizons that you hope to encounter with, putting your work and your body and your presence in front of a larger number of people? Like, how do you think that will, change your work or how you approach it? And the second question is, you visited the spaceship sculptures for an exhibition. And I feel like that's a revisiting, I guess, 2D, 3D work is, very acceptable within the art world, and performances, like maybe so. So I'm wondering if any of your performative works, if you had the opportunity to revisit them and like, not higher tech, but even just to revisit them, is there one that you really love that you would love to like do over again? Actually, not even just performance, just any particular work.
I think the rocket ships was like, it was always something secretly I wanted to build again, because I mean, I was 24 years old when I made them, and I didn't have any way to keep them, so they just got discarded, or it got discarded. And so when I was asked about this show, and they were asking about this piece specifically, I loved that idea and I ran with it. And it also felt like it almost made more sense now than it did back then, with kind of the different like concepts that I was working with. And it's not something I really think a lot about, like redoing pieces, because I feel like, I did that, I'll try something different next time. But I really like that I was able to kind of come back to that. So I was really happy with that. Your other question, I think it's going to be crazy. Like, it's going to be very different to perform in front of such a big crowd of people. And I think that my take in figuring out like the expectations of performance is that it's about me, that I'm the face of this piece, right? And it becomes like you are the artist of the performance piece, is the highlight of that. And that's what I'm trying to figure out how to not make. Because when I first got this opportunity to do, like they asked me, at the Portrait Gallery, we want you to be in this exhibition, and we'd love for you to do performances, because they'd never included performance in like an actual exhibition. Like they've had performances throughout the year, different, for different artists, but never as part of an exhibition. And so I realized the only thing that made sense to me that I could possibly do was to put the portraits of missing and murdered Indigenous women in that gallery. So in the research that I've done, I've come to find that the National Portrait Gallery actually has no portraits of Indigenous people. They're either all on loan, or they were painted by George Catlin back in like 1860. And so, or like earlier than that, probably like 1830. And so the fact that this museum that is supposed to be about portraiture within our country has nothing in their collection of our history is insane. And so I knew that I wanted to include these women, because there's nobody more important in our communities than highlighting the stories of these women. And I've always felt, even when I was doing previous work about this issue, that people would, come up to me, or I would get interviewed for different things, and they would say, tell us about your stories of MMIW. Like, is this in your family? And I always say, it's not about me. I do feel like I'm the platform for this, like I'm able to become a platform for this issue. And you need to speak to Grace Bulltail because this affects her family. You need to talk to so-and-so because this, and I point to these people or, the organizations, and I don't want to be the voice about this. I don't want to be the expert about this. I truly want to be the pedestal that heightens this issue in some way. And so in thinking about that in terms of the performance, like it is about these portraits that I'll be carrying through. My brother's going to be there. He's going to be singing. He's a Native American singer, and he's going to be singing throughout the whole thing. I'll probably be wearing all black because that's usually what I wear anyways. But, I've been thinking about how can I obscure my face, because the first thing that people are going to want to photograph if they're like tourists taking pictures of something is my face, right? Because that's what we photograph. And so like wearing like a black bandana or something like that to where the face is the portrait, and so that I'm carrying. And so that's what I want to that performance to really be about. And I want to make sure that while I am that, I'm just the structure of it. And so I think in that way, I'm really excited about it, because I think it's commenting and it's undermining the idea of what you're going to get out of a performance, I think, in some ways, and I like that. And it's the same thing with like the billboards. Like, I want those to be anonymously in the world. I don't want them to be about me. I don't want them to be about this angry brown Native woman, you know. I want it to be about these words being placed out there. Like when these were in Colorado Springs, like Fox News kept calling the museum and wanting to talk to me, and they wanted me to be on camera to talk about this piece. And I said, this isn't about that. These are anonymously out there. I made them, but this isn't about me. This isn't about Anna Tsouhlarakis. And so they got really frustrated, and like different tiers within their like news group like called me to try to get me to be on. And I was like, I'm happy to do a voiceover, but I'm not going to be on camera because you're trying to create this to be about this specific person, and I don't want that. So I think that's something that I really think about is like structuring those relationships and what you want the viewer to be allowed to see or to know about different things. So I don't know if that answered your question. So. Any other questions?
Hi there, Anna.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk. I was wondering if you could actually speak a bit more about your way of using signage, the sort of smaller pieces, as a way of conveying text, and using that to using that as a vehicle to sort of serve as a way of expressing the text, because those signs are like so specifically I don't know, associated with like, I feel like public space, like my immediate association was like, you know, bus stops, like parking spaces, like pedestrian crossings. So yeah, I would just love to hear more about that. Thank you.
So I think I talked a little bit about that. Like I push back a lot on like stereotypical like Native aesthetics. And I think that's, for me, when I had this idea to incorporate text, you know, should I, you know, do like screen prints of it? Should I write it by hand? Should I beat it? Or like do something, I don't know, you know, should I paint it? But then I realized that I didn't want it to be about the craftsmanship of it. I wanted, like, to me, the content was the text. Like, that was the important part. And there's something about that industrial signage that is, it calls you to pay attention to it, obviously, right? And so I like that idea that it gives power to my voice or to the voice of the text that I'm giving you. And so, and it's just, so for me, it becomes a vehicle of just the immediacy of getting that message to the viewer in a way. And I talked, I don't know how many people we talked about color today, but I'm, like a lot of my work is pretty neutral colored or black and white. And I like that signage just to be, like a lot of it to be black and white, because I don't like confusing things with color, especially because I'm an artist working in identity and like, you know, kind of different kind of activist issues. I feel like color can become so bogged down, like it can bog down ideas and kind of overlay them. Well, this is what she meant by that, or that's what that's supposed to be. And so like the red piece at the end, that was like, I've never made everything all red like that, and I was kind of freaked out. But you know, but I'm trying to stretch my practice too, and seeing if like this red and white thing works. So, so yeah. So to me, I like the anonymity and the lack of technique I need to bring to it in order for it to be presented to you.
How do you, so I really relate to this whole idea of like resisting this notion of what's considered to be like a romanticized idea of Native aesthetics. How do you navigate sort of the tension between resisting notions of romanticized Native aesthetics versus like colonial hegemony in the institution, right? Because a lot of what you're using in terms of sculpture are within the lexicon of contemporary sculpture within these institutions that have been built by, you know, white patriarchy. So how do you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you navigate
I mean,
that?
I think, so one thing that, like I think about a lot, and I talk about when asked questions like this, is that, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, like Native people weren't afraid to adapt. They, the introduction of beads, the introduction of silver, they took it and they evolved it into their culture, and that became traditional practice. I mean, like a lot of cultures are like that, right? Most cultures are like that. Like we have to evolve in order to stay vibrant and alive and to be thriving. And so we've always integrated those things. But there was a span, I would say, and it had a lot to do with the history of boarding schools and the forced assimilation that the US government was trying to push on Native people, specifically in the mid-20th century, where, we were all of a sudden afraid to change. And that's like when you think about like the Santa Fe School of like painting that was happening like in the 50s and 60s, like people were being told, this is what Native art is. This is we want to preserve this part of your culture, like the portraits of buffalo and feathers and stuff like that, because that's your culture. And so we were told what we had to utilize within our artwork. And so that vocabulary became what we've been using for the past like 70 years. And it's like, why all of a sudden are we afraid to evolve because we might lose our identity, when for all, since time immemorial, we've never been afraid to do that. But it's because of that like white voice telling us that. And so that's always been my idea, like, and I think that's what always started like me thinking about making work, is that I wanted to stretch that vocabulary and to take these things in and make them my own and to utilize them and to, I know this is kind of fucked up to say, but like I wanted to recolonize, like I want to colonize it. I'm going to take that over and make it my own. And so, so I kind of think about those things like within my work and utilizing new material and new medium in just kind of like it as an evolution of culture in a lot of ways. Like the ideas of what I do are based within the philosophies and the way I was raised, but the materials are much more kind of differentiated. So.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm curious about a couple of statements you made about wanting to do something, like secretly wanting to do it, but not doing it until someone like contacted you about doing it. Was there something specific that like held you back from pursuing that again and exploring that?
Usually money and space.
All right.
The rocket ships in particular are pretty huge, so. Yep.
Thank you so much, Anna. Oh, one more.
My question relates to the hesitation that surrounded yourself calling yourself like a community artist. I want to know where you delineate those things, because you talked about your work not necessarily being about yourself, and I see a lot of community in it, and I see a lot of collaboration in it, and I also wonder if there's external pressure for you to like take that over as like a name for yourself. Like, how do you think about that, just generally?
I think the biggest reason I say that I'm not a community artist is that I can say anything I want. Because I feel like if I'm a community artist, like my voice is part of that then, and I have to be, I mean, small communities, they bicker a lot, and there's a lot of, politics that kind of happens within that. And I feel like I don't know if this is true, right? Like, but in my mind, like, if I just keep ownership of that, I have more freedom in my voice, so. But no, I know people call me a community artist, and sometimes I'm like under that and everything, and that's fine. But when I talk about my work and my practice, I try to like say this is me, so nobody can blame anybody else. I didn't bring the downfall of my tribe, so. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you everyone for coming.